And as we do, we like to do a bit of a chat every now and again about what happened at the local council meeting last night. So how are you today, Matthew?
I'm very good.
How's your cold, by the way?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yep, recovered from that. So
Yay!
onward and upward.
Good. Well, we better let the people know that are listening to us right now what happened at the meeting. So draft planning agreement for the Dubbo firming power station. What happened with that?
This is one where we've got a power station, a firming power station, that will basically produce green hydrogen when there's excess electricity being produced either by wind farm or solar farms. That'll be used to produce green hydrogen, and then this firming power station will do a mix with some form of gas and hydrogen to be able to basically provide some power when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing. So good concept. We did actually approach the proponent and say we would like to have some sort of planning agreement in place. There's no requirement for it. In particular with this is just an industrial power station. They agreed to that. They wanted to put that money towards our public art strategy. We've got a public art strategy, but we don't have any funding for it, so that was fantastic. There was a fair bit of debate though between the committee meetings from 2 weeks ago and then again at the council meeting last night about how far out that public art strategy should go. There were some councillors who were keen to see that around a 15-kilometre radius around that particular firming power station. In the end, councillors decided that it would be better for the entire LGA. We're now one LGA. We've got a public art strategy that goes across the entire LGA, and the letter from the proponent there, Squadron Energy, did talk about providing money for the public art strategy for the entire council area. So that'll be $950,000 to put towards our public art strategy. So that's pretty exciting.
It is indeed, because that way you get to go all these other areas, little local communities get a bit of the funding to put some art structure around their local community as well. And
that was certainly talked about at council last night, Chris. There was some discussion around how the villages around the Dubbo Regional Council area might participate in that. So talking about Stewart Town or Mumble or Ballymore, so various little villages of Dubbo, of Dubbo Regional Council, can be part of that strategy. Now, I don't know how that money will be used exactly at this stage. We've got a public art strategy, so I can't say specifically how that money will be used, but going forward from there, we've got to get it all signed up and squared away with the proponent. But if we've got that, then that means that we can start to implement that public art strategy, which is pretty exciting.
And might get some more tourists into these local communities as well.
Absolutely right.
All right. Yeah. Well, what about this concept for the indoor aquatic centre? I reckon that's a good idea.
We have talked a lot about the potential for an indoor aquatic centre, an indoor heated pool, a whole range of things have been talked about over the years. And that was one of the things that came forward to a previous meeting, was that we've got various plans that we've seen before, various concept plans, but nothing ever really happened. Nothing's been developed further from those. So last night we resolved to put $30,000 of our budget for next year towards refining one of those plans, the 2017 plan in particular, refining that a little bit further, see if we can bring the cost down a little bit, seeing what other options there might be there available for that. So that's something that we'll look at. Nothing definite, don't get too excited. You're not going to have an indoor heated pool next week, but it's just something that might progress that. And if we get to the point where we've got plans that are on the shelf, ready to go, shovel-ready plans, any grants that become available, it's much easier to get a grant when you've got a shovel-ready plan ready to go. So that's, I suppose, part of the concept there for council is moving forward to get to that point where we might have those plans ready to go.
Which will be a good thing for people who like to swim in the winter.
Exactly right.
All right, now this is a very important one too, the Wiradjuri Culture Tourism Centre funding outcome and the Growing Regions program. What's happening with that?
Well, that is the most exciting news I've got for you today, Chris.
Good.
It was announced just last week, $7.190505 million. So let's call it $7.2 million was announced from the federal government for the Wiradjuri Cultural Tourism Centre. Now, this has been a long time coming. The first grant application was put in by council back in 2019, and that was a grant for 3 projects: Old Dubbo Jail, the plaza there, the Shared Pathway and Events Precinct, and Wiradjuri Cultural Tourism Centre. That was $10 million the council got back in 2019 from the state government. They combined that with about $2 million from council to say we can go forward with those projects. But as the planning started for the Wiradjuri Cultural Tourism Centre, it was obvious that that amount of money that was allocated there, which was about $4 million, was never going to be enough to deliver a true vision for this particular project. So we kept working, we got some more money out of the state government, so Create New South Wales from the state government came forward, so we had more money that we could put towards it. We shuffled some of those various grants around to make sure we could deliver the old Dubbo Jail Plaza and the shared pathway at Events Precinct, but we still needed a large chunk of money, because what we finally came up with was, for the Wiradjuri Cultural Tourism Centre to be delivered, was about $15 million.
That's a lot of money.
A lot of money. We didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. What we did manage to do is we said, well, we've got $5.6 million from the state government. There was 50-50 funding on offer from the federal government. So we put in a process where we said we'll use some of the state government money as part of the 50-50. So it's not all council money. And we'll put in an application to the state government. That's the one we're successful in. So the $7.2 million now combined with the 5.6 from the state government. And now, from a council perspective, we only need to put in $2.2 million for that $15 million project. Now, to give you an idea, Chris, of the significance of this, of all the federal government grants we've received over the years, this is the largest single federal government grant that this council's received ever for a community project. Sometimes there might be bridges or roads, those type of things, but for a community project, the largest single grant ever. And this particular project, a $15 million project, is the second largest project behind the theatre of all the things that we've ever going to build or ever built up to this point in time. To give you an idea of the significance of that funding as well, the theatre was $16 million. That was funded entirely by residents of Dubbo, back in those days, Dubbo City Council. We received $0 in grants for the theatre. So it was a 5% rate rise over 2 years that we had to put for that to be paid for. So that was all funded by us. And the Cultural Centre, the Western Plains Cultural Centre, $8.2 million, that was opened back in February 2007. That was 100% funded by our residents as well. So it gives you an idea of the significance of this funding. And I just want to address one other small part. There was some discussion that I heard in the community about the $2.2 million is not the real cost, because when we take $2.2 million of council money, we're not getting interest on that money sitting in the bank. So it's really more like $3 million. And that's a flawed argument, because that could apply to any money that we spend on any project. So for example, Chris, if we built a new road and it was a $5 million road, it's $5 million as the cost to council. But if you're using that same argument, you could say, oh, that road really cost $10 million because we took $5 million out of the bank and spent it. But if we left it in the bank, we'd get interest over the next 20 years, and that might be another $5 million interest. So that's really $10 million. And again, that argument is completely flawed. The cost to council will be $2.2 million, full stop. That's it. Looking at the foregone interest, you could do that with every dollar you spend. People could do that with every household item they buy. Oh, we bought a new TV for $1,000, but if I had left the money in the bank for the next 20 years, that'd be another $1,000 I'd have. So that TV really cost me $2,000. No, that's not the way spending money works. What we're spending is $2.2 million. And the other one I wanted to just talk about very briefly, Chris, was the concept of the 50-50 funding. There was also another concept that Council discussed last year, where you could put in a funding application at a 90-10 scenario. So in other words, 90% was provided by the federal government, 10% was provided by an organisation. The way that went forward, and there were a lot of specifics around this, but in general terms, that funding had to be led by an Aboriginal organisation, had to be basically an Aboriginal organisation who was going to run that project, and the 10% then had to be provided by that Aboriginal organisation, or the state government money that we had, we could have actually changed that around in some way to use that for the 10%. So the argument was it could have cost the community $0. Now, we had a long discussion about this last year. We had some workshops and some planning around that. The first thing was we would have to find an Aboriginal organisation that was ready to go to be able to put forward in that application, and also to manage a project of $15 million. Now, there's lots of Aboriginal organisations out there. Trying to find one that had the project management skills to manage a $15 million project and do that in a fairly short period of time wasn't practical. So then the argument was leave it till second round of funding, which sometime this year they'll open up second round, sometime next year they'll make that announcement. You put that all off, you're probably going to lose the timeline for the state government money. Then you're going to have to provide the 10%, maybe that's council providing that. The $15 million goes up in cost, so it might be $16, $17 million. The 10% you might provide might have to come from council, and you're delaying this whole project. So again, there's been some discussion around the community about both of those. This is a fantastic deal that we've got. the 90-10 funding, there simply wasn't ready to go down that process, and you're not sure about it. We got the funding this round. There were over 200 applications for the 40 grants that were given out in this round of funding.
Impressive.
You go and put a funding application in next time around, Chris, who knows whether or not you're going to get that funding. This is a bird in the hand. It's a very significant bird in the hand, and it's taken a long time to get here. I'm very comfortable where we're at, and councillors did vote in December last year unanimously to go ahead with this funding model. So it's a very exciting project. Again, there's been some chatter in the community about this should have cost us nothing. I think it's fair and reasonable that we put in something towards a $15 million project, and $2.2 million is not a bad amount.
Has the location been looked at yet? Is that something that comes in the future as well?
No, the location, it's Elizabeth Park, so where we've got our Shoryuan Japanese Gardens, our adventure playground, on that same parcel of land. In fact, we're at the location just this week when the announcement was made. We had some polys there to go through, and we marked out on the ground to show exactly where it will sit. So it's a pretty impressive size structure, and it will stand out. This will be fantastic for Aboriginal culture in our area, but also fantastic for our economy. For tourism, people want Aboriginal experiences, want Aboriginal products in tourism. This will be fantastic for our economy as well.
It'll definitely showcase our Indigenous heritage out here in the Central West.
You're spot on, Chris, absolutely right.
Alrighty, now what about this delegation to authority, to an update to the Infrastructure, Planning and Environment Committee? Anything come of that?
It did, well, nothing actually came of it, but there was a good discussion there. The staff requested that we have the ability for DAs, development applications, to be determined at a committee meeting rather than at a council meeting. And we discussed that, and we looked at how many DAs come to council. So for example, Chris, over the last 12 months, we've had 650 DAs that have been processed by council. Of those, only seven needed to come to council. So that was, the first thing was, well, not many come to council. If we needed to get a DA determined in a short period of time very quickly, we can still hold an extraordinary meeting to determine that. But councillors talked about the fact that at a council meeting, council resolutions are made. At committee meetings, committees are great to be able to look at things in the first instance, assess things, and then make some recommendations through to council, but not actually make council decisions, not make determinations of council. So councillors prefer the way it is at the moment, where DAs only are allowed to be determined at a council meeting if they do need to come to council rather than at a committee meeting. So no change in the way it's done at the moment. Councils are very comfortable with the way it's being done at the moment.
Now, you were saying something about how you're not getting anything from the Wellington solar farms, and you've got a bit of something happening there, hopefully, to help get some more money our way?
Councillor Richard Ivey brought forward a notice of motion last night to send a letter to the 3 solar farms in the Wellington area to ask them for some funds as part of a voluntary planning agreement. Now, part of the problem we have when you do have these various renewable projects put their applications in to the state government to have those approvals go through, they don't have to pay any money to the local community. Some of them do. We've got a framework where we ask these proponents for 1.5% of the total value of the project to be delivered to the local council for local community projects. Some of those proponents say no, some of them say yes, and in particular these 3 solar farms contribute nothing via any sort of community benefits fund, any sort of voluntary planning agreement. Now, many other projects, and I want to call out Squadron here as one of the ones that we've found very good to deal with. They've been very good in signing up voluntary planning agreements and delivering money to our community. What we're doing here is we're basically putting a bit of pressure on these 3 solar farms to say other organisations are doing it, other proponents are signing up to voluntary planning agreements. You've got your project up and running, you've got your approvals in place, but for social licence, for social conscience even, we would like you to contribute to the local community in the way that other proponents are doing that. There's no requirement for them to do that. We're really asking them from the goodness of their heart to deliver that, and we'll cross our fingers and see how we go in terms of delivering some funds to our local community.
It'd be good if they could, because it all goes to helping us in this area to put projects together like we've been talking about and help funding those, and also gives them, like you said, a bit of conscience.
Well, you're right, and more than that, when we have the renewable build finished around this zone, this renewable energy zone, 42% of the power for the entire state will be provided by our renewable energy zone. it seems fair and reasonable if we're going to provide power for the state, we're going to help solve the problem with climate change. It seems fair and reasonable that our community gains some financial benefit out of being the contributor, such a significant contributor to the state. So yes, hopefully some conscience, some social license, something in terms of those renewable proponents kicks in their mind to say this would be a good thing for our organisation and for the community to contribute.
Well, let's hope they do, because it all goes to helping our local community, of course. And, well, it's been wonderful having a chat to you once again, Matthew, and telling us what happened at the local council meeting. And I look forward to chatting to you again about what happens at the next one.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for being on DCFM 88.9. All right, we're going to get back into some more great music coming your way right after this.